Burnham. The first and most important people I spoke to were victims and survivors, and those that are working with them and supporting them. Their perspectives on our progress are the most valuable and the most insightful. Just last week, I heard testimony from survivors of child sexual exploitation about what they wanted and how they felt 1 year on. They said clearly that they just wanted to be heard. They want their experiences to be acknowledged, but even more importantly, to be used to make sure that what happened to them doesn't happen to any other girls or women. My ask would be that we take this into account when commissioning this part of the review, and that we make sure we have opportunities across the system to use that lived experience to continue to improve safeguarding services today so that they never let down again, and that we put survivors and their testimony at the heart of everything that we do. Thank you, Mayor Burnham. The first and most important people I...
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
A very, very good evening, Sunday the 2nd of July 2023. My name is Raj Amir. These are the episode 3, if we're calling them episodes, of the Recusant 9 transmission since we went subscriber only. She's lying, and I'll get to that. I will get to all of that. She's doing more than lie. She's actually deceiving, which I think is sometimes worse than lying, because deceiving is taking you for a fool.
Water and profits made by firms, and now the country's biggest water company, supplying fully a quarter of the population, Thames Water, is on the brink of collapse. Well, no better Labour frontbencher to talk to us this evening than the Shadow Environment Secretary. This is Jim McMahon. Lots of concern over the future of Thames Water. How worried should we be?
Well, I think it is a worry. You know, the largest water company in Britain, it's got debts of £14 billion that are built up. It's got millions of people who rely on it for its clean water, for dealing with the sewage. And, you know, rightly people are concerned about what that means, in particular, if it requires a government-led bailout that's then ultimately added to the bill payers. And so we've been holding the government to account. We brought today an urgent question to Parliament. The Secretary of State didn't even bother to turn up to answer the question. And so, you know, for me, it does raise kind of real concerns about whether the government have got a grip on this or whether they've been taken by complete surprise because they haven't organised well enough. So what needs to happen then? What should happen? Well, the question for the government really is this the canary in the coal mine? Is this really speaking to a wider vulnerability in our water industry, where £72 billion has been taken out in shareholder dividends? We haven't seen money invested to reduce leaks and sewage discharges.
But what should happen, though? That's the question. What right now, Thames Water, lots of people would be very worried. If you were in government, what would you do? Well, at this point, the regulator has the power to have a court order to essentially take control of the water company to make sure that it continue to trade and service its customers. And we understand those talks are taking place today. If we were in government, well, you would expect me to say we wouldn't be here in the first place because we are not surprised by this. You know, we've had the warnings of financial vulnerability from Ofwat themselves, who have said all but 2 of the water companies in England and Wales are above the debt levels that they're comfortable with, that they agreed to in the last price review. And it just strikes me that we haven't got the right balance here. We've allowed those shareholder dividends to go out on one hand, £72 billion. We've allowed debt now to reach levels of £60 billion that we're all paying for through our bills. And now we're requiring forward investment to deal with the water shortages where leaks are losing water, and also sewage discharges where our rivers, lakes and seas are being completely disrespected with raw human sewage. Well, you've spelt out the problem, right? Yeah. Does that mean that Labour would bring the water companies back under government control? Would you nationalise them? Well, we said as a point of principle, so this is for the industry overall, taking to one side the issue immediately with Thames, which is, as a point of principle, why should working people
pay twice. They've already paid through their bills for water companies.
Would Labour nationalise the water companies?
We believe that the water companies that have taken £72 billion of shareholder dividends should be made to fix a system that's broken.
Would Labour nationalise the water companies?
Well, the answer is no, because the water companies have to put right the system that they've taken £72 billion.
I'll be honest, I think there'll be an awful lot of people listening to you thinking, I agree with you. These dividends are ridiculous. Look at this. £1.4 billion in dividends to the water companies last year. That's outrageous. Sewage in the rivers and the seas, that is outrageous as well. And, of course, now these financial vulnerabilities as well. Why won't you nationalise them?
Well, at this point, why should bill payers, because that's who would pay the bill of nationalisation, why should bill payers pay water company shareholders who have already taken over £70 billion out of the system? Why should they pay them for an artificially inflated share value today to bring that into public ownership? The other side of it,
better water and cheaper in the long term, I guess.
But I think that's about regulation in the end. And we can require, instead of losing that £1.8 to £2 billion every single year in dividend payments as an average, we can direct water companies to use that to fix a sewage scandal, to fix the leaks where we're having water shortages. That's got to be the first port of call before we go to nationalisation. Now, clearly, we have to deal with all eventualities. And if we have a system, a water industry that has market failure, we're not seeing that on a systemic level yet, but we are concerned about Thames, then of course you need to look at that environment at that point in time. But that's not where we are today.
What about the regulator? Ofwat, has that failed?
But it's pretty clear that the regulator has very big questions to answer. But in the end, the regulator will only ever be as strong as the government gives it direction to be strong and gives it the powers to be strong. And I observe, frankly, a Secretary of State and a Conservative government that haven't given it the importance that's needed, haven't given it the strength of ambition that's needed, and haven't given them the powers that's needed to put this right. So absolutely they can do more, but it requires leadership from the Conservative government to really give them the direction.
Forget it doesn't answer the question. And the point really is it should be regulated. The point is it should be regulated, and in terms of nationalised, they should never have been allowed to take out billions in dividend payments from and then racking up loans at the same time. You don't borrow money and pay people profits, do you? Because you've not made profits if you're borrowing money at the other end. But that's by the by. It should be nationalised, but this Labour Party won't. This Labour Party won't commit to nationalising anything. So. And of course, when they say nationalised, brought back into public ownership, because since when should water be run at a profit? So when should our water companies ever have been run at a profit? And the Labour Party are neck deep in this, and you can see that with Jim McMahon. And he doesn't answer a single question, but he didn't realise what was going on. Poor Jim didn't realise what was going on. Poor Jim didn't realise what was going on. I have humiliated James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon over the last 4 or 5 years. Absolutely humiliated him. And this would-be once Prime Minister is now the shadow minister for sewage. It's been known to me that the Labour Party have been trying to get rid of him or move him on or safeguard him. Let's use comfortable language. Safeguard him from me and the campaign I will run. Now, he was ill last year, and they was hoping that perhaps he'd step down because of his illness, and he clearly isn't for stepping down. And more recently, they've been looking to shift him to Sheffield, is the information I've got. There's an MP in Sheffield who's terminally ill, and they want to safeguard him moving away, because when I take out Jim McMahon on the issue of the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our town's children, it won't be just our town's children, it'll be the United Kingdom's children, and there'll be serious questions to ask and questions to answer for James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon, Keir Starmer and the entire Labour Party. So they've been looking to sideline him. And we've been ramping up the pressure and ramping up the pressure and ramping up the pressure for 4 years now. Watch this next bit.
Published a story in the last hour or so to say that Keir Starmer is planning to reshuffle his top team in the next month or so. I just want to read a quote to you from the piece. The quote is, Jim McMahon is likely to be demoted from Shadow Environment Secretary, with Labour determined to do more about water cleanliness. Doesn't sound great for you?
Well, I mean, listen, first of all, that's speculation. And I'm very proud of the work that I've done in the Environment Brief. You know, the way that we have really brought now to the public's attention what's really been going on.
Are you pitching
in
to
our
keep your job
water
here?
industry.
Hoping that Keir Starmer might be listening.
I'm pretty confident that I've done a good job on water, that I've done a good job on access to nature, that we've done a good job on food security. Now, clearly, I'm not going to speculate about a future reshuffle, but I can say in terms of my record in the post that I'm very proud of what I've done. And I would just say this, how many people had it in their consciousness that raw human sewage was being dumped in their rivers, their lakes and their seas? Of course, because of the campaigners, but also because of the way that Labour has given from the front bench, and I've led from the front on that in a way that I'm very proud of, because I believe in the end it comes down to what does it mean to live a decent, fulfilled life as a working person, and having quality of life is really important to that. So, speculation to one side, I'm very proud of what I do in this job.
I mean, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, but it sounds a little bit like you're almost acknowledging that you are likely to lose your job and you're just trying to pitch for on your record.
Well, I'm not, for a start, and I'm not going to get into the speculation and the motivations behind it. But listen, the environment brief is a coveted brief, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if more people were looking at it and saying, with the profile that we've raised, in terms of food security, in terms of the water industry, in terms of nature and all that has to offer, of course, I would expect other people.
So your rivals are coming from you, maybe? Maybe they're who briefed to charge, you think?
But I'm very proud of the work that I've done, and I do think that is seen by others.
OK. Are you a cricket fan?
Not particularly, no.
What did you make of the...
He's just got told he's getting sacked live on TV. He's just got told he's getting sacked live on national television. He's got told he's getting sacked live on national television. Of course, it isn't his record on water that he's getting sacked from. They know what's coming. They know what's coming. And they want him out of the way. So he just found out he's getting sacked on national television. I think Sophie enjoyed every second of that, don't you? I think that young lady enjoyed every second of that. Okay, right, seriousness. We've been pushing, campaigning in a way this country has never seen against some of the most powerful people in this country. And Jim McMahon's career, you can see, is pretty much over on national television. He was made to look a fool, and then she told him, by the way, you're getting sacked. And you could see him blubbering. You could see the big gulp for air and the waving of frantic hands and That didn't happen by accident. You can believe that if you want. But I'm here to tell you that didn't happen by accident, and that isn't a coincidence. This is something I put up earlier in the week on Twitter for those of you who follow it. Why did the UK Labour-funded Oldham Times fail to report how Oldham Council leader Arud Shah's childhood friend, a convicted heroin-dealing getaway driver of a cop killer, was recently arrested and charged? Highest was protecting the paymasters, and the second one is the MP in Imi's pocket. The MP in Imi's pocket. Of course, you missed it in the Oldham Times, Tony. This was Arud Shah over Eid. By the way, he didn't turn up to the party in the park. I was round the corner with my mum's, at my mum's, nibbling on the samosas. He didn't turn up. There's a very glum-looking Dr. Chowan with a very, I'm not sure what the word is. She's looking very, is wag a slur? Lewis Quigg came out this week and called out Arud Shah. You can see that. He comes out this week and he calls out Arud Shah. And he's very clear, I cannot support Arud Shah maintaining a position as council leader, so when the opportunity arises, I will vote to remove her from power. So that's Councillor Lewis Quigg nailing his hat to the master.
If nothing else, in my own leadership, I have an absolute personal determination to pursue offenders to the very ends of what we are practically empowered to do. There can be no hiding space in Greater Manchester for people who have conducted themselves in this way. There is no place for people to hide. The force remains fully committed and focused on pursuing all reasonable lines of inquiry to their very fullest conclusion.
Okay. I'm going to play that again because I want you to hear it. I want you to hear what he says and I want you to hear what he misses.
I, if nothing else, in my own leadership, have an absolute personal determination to pursue offenders to the very ends of what we are practically empowered to do. There can be no hiding space in Greater Manchester for people who have conducted themselves in this way. There is no place for people to hide. The force remains fully committed and focused on pursuing all reasonable lines of inquiry to their very fullest conclusion.
Okay. Let me pick up what he says and what he doesn't say. Practically empowered to do is what he says. That's absolute nonsense. There's no such thing as being practically empowered to do, but he follows it up with saying reasonable lines of inquiry. So what he's saying is practically empowered to do and reasonable lines of inquiry means they are not going after the people that they can and should go after. Because what he should have said, and what he said falls very far short of what he should have said. He should have said word to the effects of pursue to the full extent of the law. He should have said we will pursue those responsible to the full extent of the law. Instead, he says practically empowered to do. That means someone else has told him what he can do and what he can't do. And reasonable lines of inquiry, well, who decides what's reasonable? Who decides what's reasonable? Listen to him again.
I, if nothing else, in my own leadership, have an absolute personal determination to pursue offenders to the very ends of what we are practically empowered to do. There can be no hiding space in Greater Manchester for people who have conducted themselves in this way. There is no place for people to hide. The force remains fully committed and focused on pursuing all reasonable lines of inquiry to their very fullest conclusion.
So you can see that there. And I've not edited that. That is directly from their own sources. That's the press release they put out with the Chief Constable. So, in essence, he's admitting his hands are tied. From that interview and my understanding of what you're meant to do, the full force of the law, we will go after them with the full force of the law. He doesn't say that. He even talks about his personal commitment, not the full force of the law. This press release, by the way, only took place as a consequence of what we did. Now, again, you can believe in coincidences, or you can believe that we had nothing to do with it or someone else had something to do with it. But this press release only took place as a consequence of what we did, with releasing what a public inquiry should be, why his assurance review fell far short. I'll bring up the full text in a moment. Now I want you to listen to Andy Burnham.
People are being brought to justice who may not otherwise have been brought to justice had this review not been set up in 2017. And that is the justification in the strongest possible terms for what we have done as a Greater Manchester system and why we must now continue to see this review through to its conclusion. But we should be quite clear and confident in our minds that this review was right, and because of it, we are bringing offenders to justice and protecting children. The second thing I would say, again, coming from what the Chief Constable has just...
I'll pause that. He's saying this review was right. And because of this review, people have been brought to justice. No, 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 no. This review was right. If other things would have been done, more people would have been brought to justice. More people would have been brought to justice. If an independent inquiry took place, more people would have been brought to justice. If a public inquiry took place, even more people would have been brought to justice. So the justification that we've brought some offenders to justice isn't enough, because as far as we were concerned, it wasn't just the perpetrators. It was those who covered it up, and those who also were in positions of responsibility and failed their children because of their deep-rooted prejudices towards white working-class girls. So Burnham is wrong there, and Burnham is saying he's committed to seeing this through, and the only reason he's saying he's committed to seeing this through is because of what we have done. Because the criticism hasn't come from anywhere else in this country. It's not come from Manchester. It's come from Oldham, and it's come from us, led by here. So Burnham has called a press release, a meeting with all the leaders present. He's dragged the police chief in, and he's trying to justify and legitimise himself. So that's the first thing. He is on the defensive as a consequence of us. So when people say we are not effective, we can make no difference, I say it differently to you. What's happened to Jim McMahon? He's got told live on Sky News he's getting the sack. You've got a chief constable admitting to his hands being tied, else he would have said, we'll go after them with the full force of the law. And now you've got Andy Burnham talking nonsense. And no, they're not trying to shut it down, Susan. They're not trying to shut it down. Just listen. They're trying to do something worse.
Said is Operation Sherwood and the extent of it, because we've just heard it's an extensive review, it only exists because Oldham Council came to us and asked for that element to be added to our ongoing review. And that is a point that needs to be understood. It would not be in operation at the scale it is operating at now had Oldham Council not come to the Greater Manchester Combined Authority.
Okay, pause it there. He is applauding Oldham Council, as in Sean Fielding, of going to him. Who forced Sean Fielding? Who forced Sean Fielding's hand? Did Oldham Council voluntarily do this, you snivelling little scumbag? Did Oldham Council voluntarily do this? They were going to put me in prison, remember, when I leaked it. It was all fake, remember, when I shared it and I refused to back down and I doubled down with the evidence. And Sean only went to him because the first guy, the renowned Dr. whatever he was called, ran away because he had the common sense to work out, this is a fight I want no part of. This is a cover-up I want no part of. And when Sean Fielding went to him, who covered it up for the best part of 2 years and delayed it and delayed it and delayed it? And week after week after week, day after day after day, I was still at it. Still at it, still at it. Releasing witness testimonies. All sorts, still at it. And now he's claiming this review only took place because of Oldham Council. No, it took place because for every one of us who refused to back down to claims we are far-right racists. Carry on.
And asked for a strand of the review to be added in relation to Oldham.
So that's him on a defensive. People are being brought to justice who otherwise wouldn't. It doesn't even make sense. People are. They either have been brought to justice or they haven't been brought to justice. So no one's been brought to justice by Operation Sherwood. Not a single person. So why have the Chief Constable there? Because he's on the back foot. He's on the back foot, and he's on the back foot as a consequence of what we have done. This is the leader of Manchester Council.
We approach this with the gravity and the seriousness it deserves, and it's most welcome that the voices and experiences of victims and survivors continue to be the driving force and at the heart of our work. My predecessor supported
the voices of victims. This narrative already, from Arood Shah now to her, the voices of victims are at the heart of the work. These people, Ridgway and Newsom, took no witness testimonies, remember, from victims.
Initial review the Mayor referenced, and on behalf of Manchester, I want to formally endorse the recommendation to conclude the final stage. We know that in the past, young people, predominantly young women and girls, were tragically let down by statutory services. We know today that survivors live with those scars. As leaders, it is vital. We need to have the utmost confidence that the services there to protect and serve do precisely that they protect all of our young people. And we need to be explicit that the tragic cases of the past would not be let down in the same ways by current or future practice. I can reflect only on the journey of Manchester and the...
Okay, pause. I can reflect only on the journey of Manchester. This is the leader of Manchester Council distancing herself from Oldham. I can only reflect on the journey of Manchester. This is the leader of Manchester City Council, that's the code, you heard it, distancing herself from the chaos and the complicity and the corruption in Oldham.
Root and branch reviews we have been conducting since the mid-2010s and the determined focus of improvement at the heart of all of we do. We've come a long way from the painful reading of Manchester's review, the apology of my predecessor to those let down by services, and a significant of work that's been undertaken, an assessment both internally and externally to demonstrate we've improved, but to demonstrate our openness and the collective strength and confidence we need to have across Greater Manchester, not just for our internal services, but for the multi-agency support that sits behind this. This review is therefore important, and important that we conclude it to give us the confidence we need to talk confidently about services for the future. I also want to reiterate the view that this review has forced the conviction of abhorrent criminals who would not otherwise have faced justice. We must remember that as we move forward and continue to work with GMP to make sure that those that sought to exploit our young people face the punishment and the convictions they deserve.
She reckons that lessons have been learned and all the rest of it. At the centre of what was taking place in Manchester is this lady, young woman, Victoria Goglia. The family are actually seeking a new inquest into her death. She died in care, drugs overdose. There was a diary. An independent review, well, it was never independent, into Operation Augusta was commissioned by Andy Burnham. The review found Operation Augusta had identified at least 57 victims and 97 potential suspects. Yeah, what's happened? Nothing. The Independent Office for Police Conduct said the decision was made as there was no indication that officers had breached standards. So no one did anything wrong. No one did anything wrong. That's what took place there. This is the Manchester Evening News. Victoria Goglia's diary, police only got access 3 months ago. So this is November 2020. The recovery of a diary kept by teenage sexual abuse victim Victoria Goglia provided crucial new evidence leading to the arrest of a suspect. GMP became aware of the existence of Victoria's diary last year, but only obtained it in August. It had been in the possession of Manchester Council since her death 17 years ago. So what? What had the council done? Am I reading that right? The council had hidden the diary, yeah? And now the leader of Manchester Council is saying we've learnt lessons and all these things are great. When here it seems that the young child at the centre of what instigated the Manchester review, her family aren't happy. They want an inquest. And the City Council was hiding the diary. And all the police officers involved, they've done nothing wrong. That's why we need a public inquiry, because they're trying to shift it down the, oh, we care about the victims. You've heard Arooj Shah, you've heard Burnham, you've heard the leader of Manchester Council. Let's listen to Arooj Shah again, because this is really, really significant. What she says is really significant.
I spoke to were victims and survivors, and those that Burnham. The first and most important people I spoke to were victims and survivors, and those that are working with them and supporting them. Their perspectives on our progress are the most valuable and the most insightful. Just last week, I heard testimony from survivors of child sexual exploitation about what they wanted and how they felt 1 year on. They said clearly that they just wanted to be heard. They want their experiences to be acknowledged, but even more importantly, to be used to make sure that what happened to them doesn't happen to any other girls or women. My ask would be that we take this into account when commissioning this part of the review, and that we make sure we have opportunities across the system to use that lived experience to continue to improve safeguarding services today so that they never let down again, and that we put survivors and their testimony at the heart of everything that we do. Thank you, Mayor Burnham.
They put survivors and the victims at the heart of everything we do. That is an admission that the Oldham Assurance Review was a cover-up with serious failings because it did not put survivors or victims at the heart of anything because they did not even speak to them. The second weakness there, of what Arooj Shah talks about, is she reckons the victims, children who were groomed and gang raped and passed around for hundreds, thousands of men to rape, they don't want those people who raped them to be brought to justice. They don't want the police officers they want crying to be held accountable. They don't want the social workers who call them little white slags to face disciplinary action. They don't want the politicians who covered it up and hid it from the newspapers and actively got themselves involved in suppressing what took place, covering it up. They don't want them in any way held accountable. Do we believe that? Do any of you believe that? That's better. This is what came out. This is their own, off their own page. Mayor and leaders endorse final stage of comprehensive independent child sexual exploitation. Why is it comprehensive? What's comprehensive about it? And why are they having to endorse it? When he commissioned the work, there was no need to get approval for this last bit. He's gone back to all the council leaders to try and hide behind. That's what's gone on. There was no need to have it approved again to endorse. There was no need. He'd already commissioned it. Look, following the airing of the BBC documentary The Betrayed Girls, the mayor announced he wanted to assure himself and the public that everything possible had been done to protect children today and in the future and prevent it from happening again. Do you see? It's an evaluation. It's not an investigation, it's an evaluation. Since then, independent reviews into Manchester Part 1 and Oldham Part 2 have been completed, with Rochdale Part 3 due to report by the end of 2023. Again, it will again be led by nationally recognised independent experts. They're not nationally recognised, and the Shiraz Island independent, Newsom and Ridgway, with an expectation that will be completed by the end of the year. Absolute nonsense gobbledygook. This is an issue at the absolute top of my priority list. The reviews we have already published into Manchester and Oldham have made for very difficult reading. I have been pleased to hear of the progress being made by Greater Manchester Police under Chief Constable Stephen Watson. There is no progress. If there was, he'd have said, we've arrested 10 people. We've charged 20 people. There's none of that, none of the hard data. Operation Sherwood was set up to review just the 10 cases in Oldham, plus a further case, so 11 cases. Nonsense. Apparently they've got 106 dedicated investigators. There is a limit to what we can say, as it is a live investigation. There might be a limit, but you can say how many people you've arrested or how many people you've charged. You're not limited from sharing that, are you, Chief Constable? Nah. He's talking nonsense. Because when he talks about Operation Lytton, he's happy to give numbers. The second cohort is 11 men charged with 103 offences. Trial date, blah, blah, blah. This is 1 year in, by the way, Operation Sherwood. It's nonsense. After the endorsement of the Mayor and leaders at our Greater Manchester Combined Authority meeting on Friday the 30th of June, the independent review team will now progress the fourth and final part of the independent CSE assurance review. How many were independents can they get in there? On the 3rd of July 2017, Andy Burnham had a choice. On the 3rd of July 2017, Andy Burnham had a choice. His choice was to order an evaluation, which is this internal review bollocks, which is now 6 years later. 6 years? 6 years. He could have ordered an independent inquiry in the style of Telford, paid for it himself. He could have done all of that. He had the power to do that. He didn't. Instead, he ordered this internal review, evaluation. Or he could have gone to the government and said, this is a national outrage. Greater Manchester towns are clearly at the centre of this. Please, come and do a public inquiry. He stood up for Hillsborough. He stood up for Liverpool. And I'm a Liverpool fan. Why is he not standing up for the white working class girls in these Labour Party controlled towns? This is a cover-up of a cover-up. And I guarantee you, once we get our public inquiry, Andy Burnham's career is over, which is why he's squirming. The Manchester leader wants nothing to do with it, which is why she can only speak for Manchester. The Chief Constable is already giving out coded messages that his hands are tied. Or else he would have said, we will chase them down with the full force of the law. And Arood Shah is being Arood Shah and she's having a dig at Burnham's team. She's as good as saying that the assurance review was a cover-up and it failed because it failed to take the testimony of victims, which is what we've been saying all along. She's admitting to that. And she's also trying to cover it up, saying, oh, I've spoken to survivors. They don't want anything done to Mr. Abdul, who owns the takeaway, or Mr. Shabir, who owns this. Or the police officers who handed them over. Or the social workers who failed them. Or the politicians who told the, newspapers not to report on it. No, no, no. We don't need anything there. So we've got all the leaders of Manchester Council on the run. We've got the Mayor on the run. We've got the Chief Constable squirming. And Jim McMahon on the verge of being sacked. We're doing all right, aren't we? What I put up at the beginning was a Lenin quote, for those of you who know your history, about controlling the opposition. Just give me a second.
Hi. As you know, the Royton Independents back a public inquiry. Since my last video, I have again emailed Councillor Stephen Bashworth and Councillor Marie Bashworth, and I asked them the same question. Would they support a public inquiry? They haven't responded. Nothing. Totally ignored me. Refused to answer a question from a fellow elected councillor. Pre-election, on Royton Community Hub, Councillor Stephen Bashworth was very vocal. He was answering questions from the residents and putting himself, as he thought, in a very good light. However, two residents asked him a similar question. Would he vote for a public inquiry? And he gave two answers, both similar, and I quote, to one he said, I feel one is needed again to give people confidence. So the answer is yes. To another resident, he replied, however, if the government will sanction a further inquiry, I, for one, will support it. Pre-election. Pre-election. Another resident asked him a further question. How many children have been groomed and gang raped? And he replied again, I have no idea. And no, I'm not hiding anything. Councillor Stephen Bashforth, I have no idea. I've no idea. I don't know how many kids have been groomed and gang raped. Is it 100? 500? 1,000? 5,000? Why would you vote down a motion when you didn't have the facts? Why did every Labour councillor vote that down without knowing how many of our children had fallen victim to these people? But we know that was before the election, and this is now. And now, Stephen Bashforth and Marie Bashforth are not answering anything. We're not hearing anything. So, have they, along with the other Labour councillors, been told what to say? Have they been instructed from above to say, we're not having one? Play it down. Don't answer questions. Who does she think she is? What's the answer? Before the election, Councillor Stephen Bashforth was voting for one. Now he's been elected, it would seem he isn't. So, myself and the Royton Independents need your help. We need you to ask your councillor that question. Send them an email and ask them if they would vote for a public inquiry. And please, copy and paste their responses back onto here so that everyone can see which councillors care about our children, which councillors want justice for our children. The election was in May. We are now in July. How can you change your mind, Councillor Stephen Bashforth, so quickly? But then again, you got elected back in, didn't you? So maybe that's why. Maybe you never had any intention of getting justice for our children. To everyone else, please, please, please. It's Sunday evening. Pick up your phone, pick up your laptop and email your councillors. Ask them. See if they respond to you. Because they're not responding to me. I've had emails, telephone calls, I've been stopped in the street. I've listened and I heard your devastation, feelings. How many of you were appalled? Send that to your councillors. Tell them how you're feeling. And see if, as members of the public, the people that they're supposed to represent, can make them give them an answer. Come back here. Let us know. Let us know which councillors care. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try and do this as respectfully as possible. So that's Maggie Hurley, who rightly is focusing on, in the first instance, fellow Royton South councillors, particularly Stephen Bashforth, who said he would support a public inquiry and then has now gone quiet. And she alludes to throughout that she doesn't know what the Labour Party position is. I'm sorry, Maggie, you do know what the Labour Party position is, because I know what the Labour Party position is. I'll show you what the Labour Party position is, because it went out in the email batches about the motions. The first of the proper council meetings are on the 12th of July. Many of you have worked with me on getting some questions in, yeah? Well, all the councillors have been, to the best of my knowledge, unless they haven't emailed Maggie or Mark, I don't know. This is the Labour Party response. This motion, moved by Councillor Arooj Shah and seconded by Councillor Shahid Mushtaq. The Council notes, a year on from the publication of the Oldham Assurance Review into Historic Safeguarding Practices in Oldham and the subsequent publication of the recommendations of the Independent Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse, led by Professor Alexis J., both findings institutional failings and that much more is needed to instill confidence in victims and survivors, that adequate support and justice will be secured when complaints are made to officials. This council notes that the findings in the Oldham Assurance Review into Historic Safeguarding Practices in Oldham found a clear political commitment and a sustained attempt to develop best practice in addressing the threat of child sexual exploitation. That is an outright lie. That statement there is an outright lie. The statement claiming, the council notes, that the findings in the Oldham Assurance Review into Historic Safeguarding Practices in Oldham found a clear political commitment and a sustained attempt to develop best practice in addressing the threats of child sexual exploitation. That's an outright lie. So what they want to first of all do is rewrite history in their motion. They want to rewrite history in the motion. They want to say that there was also commitment was shared by many dedicated frontline workers. What does many mean? 1, 2, 10 out of 1,000? It is clear, here's the admission, however, there was unacceptable systemic failures, not individual failures, systemic failures. So it's no one's fault, it was a system to blame, to provide support and justice to victims and survivors, and to hold offenders to account for the abuse they carried out. Nothing about those in positions of power and influence who failed them. Victims and survivors, and hold offenders to account. The council notes the response from the Mayor of Greater Manchester and Chief Constable, and the promise to review cases as part of Operation Sherwood. So what? The council believes that the findings of the National Independent Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse further demonstrated a failure to provide support and justice to victims and survivors across the country. So it weren't just us failing our children. Apparently it was happening across the country. But what he doesn't say, because the people in that meeting are too stupid or will collude along with it, is that the Independent Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse did not look at the grooming gangs, because the Telford inquiry was set up specifically to look at the grooming gangs, because this inquiry failed to do so. Do you remember? The judge being very clear as to why the Telford inquiry had been commissioned. It's because this inquiry ditched it. So this inquiry has got nothing to do with grooming gangs, and they're trying to hide behind this inquiry because they think you lot are a bunch of stupid. And it should not go unnoticed that the leader of the council is Pakistani and the deputy leader is Pakistani, and it's inconceivable that two Pakistani politicians are putting forward this motion, trying to say everything's okay regarding the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of children by predominantly Pakistani men, as confirmed by the Home Secretary. So they're trying to hide behind a national report that had nothing to do with grooming gangs. The defence is everyone else was doing it. And then they're trying to claim, but our politicians were doing great and our frontline staff were doing great. So that's the first bit that they're talking about. The council believes that public confidence is essential in combating child sexual abuse and exploitation, and that public awareness and transparency on the characteristics of abuse and how it presents in various forms are important to the public, identifying indicators and patterns of potential abuse when it takes place and in reporting it for investigation. What on earth does that mean? I have no idea. You need to spot the signs in its widest context. We can't just concentrate on the Pakistani rape gangs, because it's racist concentrating on the Pakistani rape gangs, even though the Pakistani rape gangs are what the issue is in this town. We've got to concentrate on all the others. Otherwise, we're racist. That's what they're saying. So this is the craziness. The council resolves that the chief executive write to the Home Office to request that they accept each of the 20 recommendations made by the National Independent Inquiry. It's a National Independent Inquiry. The government bloody commissioned it. The inquiry reports directly back to the government. It's got all to do with Oldham. Oldham wasn't one of the case studies. Why are you writing to the government to implement the findings of an investigation that the government commissioned that reports back directly to government themselves? This is to confuse you and distract you into thinking they've done something. So the chief executive from Oldham is writing to the Home Office to say implement your own findings you're implementing anyway. The second thing they want to say, motion, is that following the National Independent Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse led by Professor Alexis J. and Oldham Assurance Review into Historic Safeguarding Practices in Oldham, how are they comparing the two and combining them? One was led by a professor who did the Rotherham Review. Tens of thousands of pages, victim testimony after testimony. The Oldham Assurance Review was written on the back of a cigarette packet. The government will support the final stage assurance review announced by the Mayor of Greater Manchester. Hold on. The final stage review announced by the Mayor of Greater Manchester has got nothing to do with you. It's to do with the Mayor of Greater Manchester. If he wants the government to support it, he should be writing to the government to say support it. Do you see how you're being played? Do you see how you're being played? And this document, by the way, I've got from my internal sources in the council. It's in the inboxes of every bloody councillor. And no, I'm not angry at Maggie. I'm angry at this. Because they know what they're doing, Maggie. This is what Bashforth is doing. This is what every Labour councillor is doing, because every Labour councillor knows about this. The council further resolves that the chief executive write to the borough members of parliament, so that's Jim McMahon, Debbie Abrahams, that they make representation to the Home Office supporting the council's request for the government to accept each of the 20 recommendations. So the 20 recommendations have got nothing to do with Oldham, not created in Oldham, national. Yeah, Alexis, I'm sure Alexis J, Professor Alexis J, is capable of speaking for themselves. Don't you? I'm sure they don't need the Shadow Minister for Sewage and the Kashmiri spokesperson to speak on their behalf or on the behalf of their expert team. The council further resolves to develop and adopt a victim and survivors charter in consultation with victim and survivor groups. Who are the victim and survivor groups? How many victims were there? They don't even tell us how many victims there were. Support further work to raise public awareness among young people in all relevant settings and with the general public to support prevention, early identification of child sexual abuse and exploitation, and to promote the greater reporting of safeguarding concerns. How? That's not a motion. There's nothing specific. Support further work. What's the further work? Put a poster of Shabir Ahmed and put it up in every school and youth club. To develop and adopt a mandatory duty to report safeguarding concerns, including child sexual abuse and exploitation, enshrined in the Code of Conduct for elected members. The council, because it's already there, because everyone as a corporate parent has a duty. Every one of them. Robert Barnes talked passionately about it last year, if you remember, as a corporate parent. We didn't know it was our job to report the gang rape of children. So let's tell you what, let's put it in a charter. And that way we do know it's our job to report the gang rape of children. and an update on Operation Sherwood is provided to the Children and Young People Scrutiny Board. How can you resolve that an update of Operation Sherwood is provided to the Children and Young People Scrutiny Board? Why is an update of Operation Sherwood not provided to full council? And do you know what, Lynn? And I'll again be respectful. There are councillors who just toe the party line, and the Labour Party lot will toe the party lines. But this is what's gone out to all the opposition councillors. This is in the inboxes of every one of the opposition councillors. It took me, 5 minutes, 10 minutes to rip it to pieces? At least Maggie's talking. I'll give her that. At least she's talking. She's new. At least she's talking. But the situation's past her. They've outflanked her and outmaneuvered her. What did I say? They'll make the move straight away. What did I say? They'll make the move straight away. And this isn't the only move they've made. So they're saying they're trying to hide behind a national inquiry that has got nothing to do with the grooming gangs. They're trying to say everyone did it, and that's why we failed as well. They want this victims charter. They want the councillors to have some sort of rule to say they've got to report gang rape, as though they never had that rule anyway. And they want to say they all did well. I knew this motion was coming. I tried to warn people. I knew the next motion was also coming. And I'll bring this up. I want to bring up the Failsworth Independent Party's motion. The Failsworth Independents have put forward this motion: an independent public inquiry into child sexual exploitation, historical and present, within Oldham Metropolitan Borough, including the actions and knowledge of council members and officers. Council notes that. So this is Brian Hoban. Now I'll read it first and I'll tell you what's gone on. The Newsom and Ridgeway review into historic child sexual exploitation in Oldham was published on Monday the 20th of June 2022. The review found that some children had been failed by agencies that were meant to protect them, and that there were serious failings in the handling of some cases. The review was discussed at an extraordinary full council meeting. The public were invited to submit. While questions were asked, sadly many were left unanswered and some wholly ignored. Unfortunately, questions remain, blah, blah, blah. It is very clear that a significant dissatisfaction with the public. The purpose of the inquiry should be to fully investigate the facts of child sexual exploitation. We acknowledge that Operation Sherwood, which has been set up by JMP, will look into the criminal activity and hopefully bring convictions on the perpetrators of these heinous crimes. The leader of the council has previously stated that CSE has in all probability will continue to occur in the borough. Together we need to eradicate this corruption which lies within our society, and this is the motion. The council resolves that the Chief Executive writes the Home Secretary and Minister for Housing, Communities and Local Government on behalf of the council, requesting that they instigate a full, independent and broad-ranging public inquiry as soon as is practically possible. That the terms of reference for the inquiry are set independently of Greater Manchester and OMBC administrators by government, and that all relevant documentation, including those relating to the recent assurance review, are made available to the inquiry. That a cross-party steering group works alongside the inquiry. It is my opinion that this motion was written in partnership with the Labour Party. This motion was written in partnership with the Labour Party because it's so badly worded and it's done on purpose. And the reason why it's done on purpose, so we're clear, so you're clear, the reason why it's done on purpose, and this is where Maggie and her team have been completely outflanked, is that they've got to vote for this shit, and it is shit. Because remember, we were very clear, even last week we were very clear. The historical stuff. How many were? Who failed them at the time? We wanted to cover up the attack on the whistleblowers investigated. Operation Hexagon. And we wanted Burnham's assurance review looked at because we believe that to be a cover-up. We were very specific with the 4 strands of what a public inquiry should do. And you don't need to say in a public inquiry, that it is independent, because by the very nature of it being a public inquiry, it's independent, And if it's independent, you can't have a cross-party steering group that works alongside the independent inquiry, you stupid fake mother. These guys have done this on purpose. These guys have done this on purpose. Hoban has done this on purpose. And by this assurance, this motion being voted on the 12th, it means that for the next 12 months, you cannot have another motion on this. Hoban knew full well what he was doing. You know how Fat Frank got himself a football pitch? Maybe Oldham Council are looking to see how they can give grants to pubs. No, it's not frustrating, Amanda. It's intentional. Hoban, Hindle and Lucia Ray did this intentionally. I could train a group of year 6 students in an afternoon and they'd write a better motion. And the timing of the motion is wrong as well. So the Met did it as early as possible, as quickly as possible. So it's all forgotten about. This is a partnership between the Failsworth Independent Party and Arooj Shah's Labour Party. I do not say this lightly. This is a partnership. A vote for FIP is a vote for Arooj Shah. It's not even a vote for Labour, it's a vote for Arooj Shah. There are Labour Party politicians I know who won't support this. Who wouldn't have done this? Why has he put this motion forward in the way he has? To hamstring the opposition. The best way to control the opposition is to lead it yourself. And whatever I think of Arooj Shah, she is one ruthless politician who knows how to operate. There is a way to impact the first one, the council one, using the council's own rules and regulations. There is a way to impact this second one for Failsworth Independence. I'm not going to do it. I'm not your councillor. I'm not going to do it. I'll explain why in a little while. Oh, I'll get to that, Denise. Don't worry about that. The motion, the Conservative motion, in a town where everything is collapsing, and you can read that yourself, they want to build a Muslim cemetery. They want an exclusive cemetery for the Muslims. I go to the one in Chadderton a lot. I've got friends and family buried there. I think one of the heartwarming things in a town like ours is when I go to the cemetery and I put flowers down at an auntie's grave or an uncle's grave, or go to a funeral. You see people from other communities at the gravestones of their own family members, and I think in a town like ours it helps. It helps bring people together. That's not enough for the Conservatives now. With Cameron Ghaffar in as the deputy leader, their first motion is they want the council to hand over land so they can build their own Muslim cemetery. There are 7 cemeteries across Oldham, but regarding cemeteries with existing separate burial sections for Muslims, there is only one, Chadderton. Other faiths have their own cemeteries within the borough, for example, the Jewish cemetery in Failsworth. That's just one faith, and the Jewish cemetery in Failsworth, and the historical context of why that is it's clearly lost on Cameron. As our Muslim population in the borough increases, there will only be more need for spaces for burial as time goes on. Chadderton Cemetery, as it currently has, around 5 years remaining before it reaches capacity. With this motion proposes the creation of a separate Muslim cemetery within the borough to help minimise the risk of capacity crisis at Chadderton Cemetery. That's why I slapped my head, Sheila. That's why I slapped my head. And they don't just want a separate cemetery. They want to maintain it themselves. And Gary, just so we're clear, this motion was put forward by Councillor Ghaffar and seconded by Councillor Pam Byrne. They now want to segregate our cemeteries. They want to privatise cemeteries as well. Do cartel members get preferential plots? You know what's coming. Yes, Ian, this is indeed the Tories going down the cartel route. It's the Saddleworth Tories in partnership with the Hollingwood Tories. I think the Oldham Conservatives, the white Oldham Conservatives, have been sidelined in this. The council therefore resolves to, and of course all of this has already been sorted with Arooj Shah and her mates, ask the Chief Executive to identify a parcel of land for use as a Muslim graveyard, that this land be considered for donation. They've already created their own committee, the Oldham Muslim Cemetery Committee. I don't know what to say, Mark. I don't know what to say. Motion no confidence, and Mark Ince is here. I'm afraid I came up short. I put Mark Ince in a position, I put Maggie Hurley in a position. I didn't really speak to Sandra, but Sandra's skills aren't fighting for you in a council chamber. She's a lovely lady, and she's one of those councillors that are embedded in a community. And her skill set is elsewhere, so I didn't even go to her. I spoke with Mark. I got the impression he's a new councillor. It's a big ask of him, and it's a bit early for him. I spoke with Maggie at length. I got different reasons from her, because the failing is mine. I shouldn't have gone and asked people who weren't ready or who didn't consider this to be the way to fight at the right time to fight. And of course the new councillors. They've got 4 years at this. And I've reflected on my own actions. My own belief is a vote of no confidence was the right time. Got Burnham on the ropes. We've got Arooj Shah fighting Burnham. We've got all of this else stuff going on. McMahon in trouble. The Mail on Sunday. Irish in his most recent charge. And I ended up putting people in a position I shouldn't have. So what I'm going to do is step back from the political lobbying and political educating and trying to influence any of the councillors. You voted for them, you elected them, and I have nothing but respect for them. Because they should be allowed to find their feet and make the decisions. And of course, I'll help. If there's ever a need for me to help and they get in touch, of course I'll help. I helped the Writing Independence this week. Spent a couple of hours filling in some forms trying to get the party registration complete. So there's no motion and no confidence, and if one comes at a later date, which it might do. What is it they say? A week is a long time in politics. I fear after the meeting on the 12th, you will see who's firmly in control and who's working alongside them. And any such motion will be too little, too late. There are lessons in leadership for me, all the time. I reflect. All the time I reflect. It's not just you shouldn't ask people to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. That's not enough. You shouldn't ask people to do something that they're not equipped to do. They're not ready yet to do. Also, that isn't their priority. And on that, I got it wrong. So there is no motion of no confidence. We couldn't get people to sign up to it. And the consequence for me, and also with what's just gone on now, with how FIP have reacted and how Arooj Shah and Shahid Mushtaq, two Pakistani councillors, have put forward a motion saying we ain't got a grooming gang problem, essentially. And then the Tories saying they want a separate Muslim graveyard. I think the best we can hope for is for Mark, Maggie, Sandra to find their feet, to be good ward councillors, advocate on behalf of the community, deliver locally, and hopefully come next May get more people in. Because this fight now is lost. At this moment in time, this fight is finished. And in terms of my priorities, I have a general election to go and fight against McMahon. I know what the head of the snake is. To all extents and purposes, it's a suicide mission. I launched my campaign this week. I put something out and I saw the number of shares it got. I saw the people who did share it. I'm not going to force anyone to share it or ask people why they shared it or didn't share it. I'm not going to ask anyone to come and fight with me or alongside me. I'll see this through to the end. So is this the end? I think this is an end. It's an end of me directly engaging, lobbying in the council chamber. It's not the best use of my time right now. And it's disrespectful for me to do so whilst we've got new councillors. They need to grow and they need to find their own feet and not have me looming over them. And with the greatest of respect, I think there's a bigger fight. And that's with McMahon, and that's at the general election. I wanted to get the motion of no confidence over the line because I knew what was coming, but couldn't convince enough people of its importance or its significance. And I reflected and I realised, actually, who am I? Who am I in this? I'm not the elected official. I'm not the elected councillor. All I can do is provide analysis, critique, offer guidance. But they've completely outflanked us. And I tried my best. And I couldn't get people to understand what was going on. It's not their fault. They're new. So no, that's it. Moving forward, I'll do the analysis, I'll do the education, I'll do the, this is what's going on, that's what's going on, something else is here, have you looked at this? I'll do all of that. But I'll draw a line on trying to influence politicians who need to find their feet. And that's it, isn't it, Matt? The truth is you're not sufficiently prepared at the moment. And I think you're very brave. I think Mag is very brave. I think Sanders very brave. I'm not going to criticise you. How dare I criticise you? But I'm not Jim McMahon. I'm not Arud Shah. I'm not that sort of person. I'm not a dictator. These councillors need to find their own feet. And of course, when they need, even when they need my help, I'll go and help them. But you've lost your public inquiry this way. I will go and deliver a public inquiry a different way. I'm going for reinforcements. I'm going somewhere else. I'm circumnavigating this council chamber. There are things I will do. And you'll see that next week. There are things I will do. And there are things I will do in the lead up to the general election. And Mark's decent. He comes on here the same as Liam Billington does. But a lot of the others don't. You've seen them. A lot of the others hide. There's an irony here, isn't there? I have 25 years of public service. I'm a decorated anti-racist. And those who have helped and supported don't openly acknowledge me. Yet we've got Arud Shah who hangs off the arm of a convicted heroin dealer who's a getaway driver of a cop killer whose latest charge includes an offensive weapon believed to be a machete. I've got an election to fight. And I think for the next 6 or 7 months, I'll still put the content out, but my focus will be elsewhere. Mark needs to get into his first council meeting. He's not even been in a council meeting. The best thing we've got is Mark's in for 4 years, Sandra's in for 4 years, and Mag is in for 4 years. They all finished first. But if you think you're getting a public inquiry, you're not. What they've done is killed it. Or if you think you're getting a public inquiry through the route of the council, you're not. But there are other ways, and I'll get you a public inquiry a different way. And we'll lobby for it and we'll work for it. And yeah, I am devastated. I am gutted. Because I knew what was coming. But I can't force people. And it's wrong for me to even try. Particularly after what they've done. I will see you during the week. I'll see you on Sunday where all these other things that you wanted me to look at, I think, to do with stuff like that, Sheila, I'll go through that. I'll go through the public questions because, you know, we've gone on this journey together where we're ramping up the pressure, and it was working. We just couldn't get the motion in. So I can do all of that. I can look at the council stuff, the stuff that comes out, public questions, support you to our freedom of information. I can do all of that. The analysis of council meetings, minutes, all of that. But I'm not going to lobby. I'm not going to put people I respect in challenging situations where they're skirting around giving me a direct answer. It's unfair on them. And as for Lewis, I think the young lad's been exposed now. He stuck his neck out. And those of you who live in Royton North, I'd like you to remember that come the election. And even if you don't live in Royton North, I'd like you to remember that come the election. And go and support him and help deliver his leaflets. He's the only councillor that stuck his neck out from the mainstream party. Have you noticed? Nothing from the Lib Dems, nothing from any of the other Conservatives. Nothing from any of the Labour Party. He's the only mainstream councillor. I think Mark's also issued a statement very early on. No, we've got work to do, Julie. We've got work to do, and there's a different way of winning this. But we're not going to win it through the council chamber right now. The people we've got, they've got a lot of growing to do. I think that, Denise, yeah. No, we'll win, Tony. We'll win in a different way. We'll win in a different way. Tony, you've been out with me. Yeah, Denise, Tony, you've been out with me. You've been out delivering leaflets with me. I didn't deliver those leaflets for me. You didn't deliver those leaflets for me. We delivered them for the town. We supported the other candidates. Yeah. We tried to get opposition candidates through, and we did get opposition candidates over the line. I want to leave you with a question. I know I'm marching to political suicide against the machinery of McMahon. I've got to raise £25,000 for my election campaign. 50,000 leaflets a time. How many councillors will share my materials on their Facebook pages? How many councillors will go and knock on doors and ask for people to vote for me? Have a think of that. See, Gary, that's my question. You're too trusting, Julie. I had a conversation in Caldas not long ago with Montaz and his lot before I was wrapping up with them because they weren't doing enough to engage with the wider community, which is the main reason why I left them. And it was very clear that they wouldn't be campaigning for me at all. And these are people I know. I was in Kenya about 15 years ago. I was doing some work in Nairobi. Remember the shopping centre? I think it's 60 or 70 people were shot dead by what we then knew as Al-Shabaab. And after I'd done my whatever I'd been sent to do, I was dipping my feet in the ocean in Mombasa, just hanging out. And I was chatting to some Kenyan lads. They were going to fight Al-Shabaab and they knew they were going to their deaths. I spent some time with them. And we got talking. And I woke up this morning remembering the conversation we had. It's the right thing to do. If not us, then who? If not us, then who?
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.